Hello everybody, I'm here waiting for Andrew MacDonald to come on the call and accept my invitation to join us. Hopefully this will work because Andrew has much to share and he really is a picture of the truth and he shares the truth, which is probably why we are having partially this issue with connection, because he can't use Zoom, we can't record on Skype. This is our only opportunity to do it through Facebook Live, and he is finding it difficult to get on board here as well. Now, if he doesn't actually join me on this call, I'm going to leave this here as an introduction to go on to his own recording live that he is going to do. Okay, he is here. Okay, let's just see what happens. Okay, we've got him watching. So now it's adding him to the call. Okay, cool. He's accepted the invitation. It says he's watching. He is truly watching, but it isn't saying it is adding him as yet. So he needs to look for a notification to be added to the conversation. So that he can join us here. But even if he can't, he can record his own live to be attached to this call, what I'm doing right now, because he will need an introduction. So whilst he's looking for that, I'll go back to what I was talking about, in that he is pure truth of everything, and he's had many experiences of the darkness and the light, and this is actually potential block from dark elements, because many people aren't aware of them, and Andrew knows all about them through experiences. So what we will share with you, either through this introduction to his video or him joining me shortly, is the fact that the truth is stranger than fiction. Many of you will have seen The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, Harry Potter, and think that this is all about, and think that that is actually just fiction. And in a way it is, but it's also reality portrayed as fiction. And there's some sort of block going on with me speaking to Andrew, but that's okay, because this video can go in front of one that he records live, as the invitation to join this call doesn't seem to be working yet again. So I'm just going to leave this here and allow him to do another video that can be edited to it. But what I want to say about Andrew, he is pure truth, and his truth is stranger than fiction. And he needs to share that with you. And we will get him to share that with you, even if he's not sitting next to me talking. This will be in front of a video introducing him. I have spoken to Andrew prior, and he is very aware of all that is, and his story of himself and his view of all that is a remarkable one, and he will share that with you. in a video here in which this is an introduction. He has much to share. He has had many interesting experiences with the darkness, and he is of pure light. And he knows that now is the time to step up and show up, and he is. He's come here. So his message is one that is vital for all. I know he's trying to desperately get on this call. He's partially way there, but it's still not fully there. But that's okay. He will record his own live here that will be edited to this. I just wanted to give an introduction to him, and because of this experience and what he's spoken about with me, his truth is stranger than fiction. If you think any of those fantasy films like Lord of the Rings are totally out there, they're more real than you think. And Andrew has things to share about that. So there are many elements of truth that people do not understand in this world. People do not know about in this world. Heather and I know about them, Andrew knows about them, and many others in the group know about them. And I feel that Andrew is going to share his truth of his experience of all elements, and it's why he's been blocked to speaking with us today. But that's okay, because this is just an introduction to all that he is, and he will share all that he is with you after this. So without further ado, I'm just going to let him explain himself and his story in his own way, because his story is powerful. His story knocks what people think is reality out of the ballpark. His story brings the full truth of the reality of this earth space to the forefront. We have experienced all sorts of blockages to get him out there, but we will get him out there, because his story, his life story, is what you need to know what this space actually is, to know what we're up against, to know how he can help you with that, as can myself and Heather and a number of others in the summit. But Andrew has particular strong experiences, only matched by those of Heather and myself, in regards to, if the devil exists, we've met him and been face to face with him, shall we say. And Andrew's story is very pure on that. So I will allow him to speak and allow him to share. And thank you very much, Andrew, for persevering and making sure somehow we get you out there. And please, everybody, listen to Andrew, and he will be waiting to assist you through the website itsatoughnworldoutthere.com, where you can connect with him directly to assist you going forward. Andrew, I honour you in all that you are, and I look forward to hearing your sharing and seeing you sharing it. Here is Andrew MacDonald.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew MacDonald here, and it's been an interesting evening trying to get this video happening with Shona, although so much interference, I would say, from the dark side, as I would agree with Shona. yeah, we've had to do it separately. So in sharing, I would have to sum up my life and say it's not your average life. I know from my parents talking, the night that I was born, I had a visitor, let's say, a celestial visitor, swept past my father when he was sitting in front of the fire. It was quite cold in England in October. I was a home birth, and a breeze swept past him, and a couple of seconds later, I was probably only an hour and a half old or so, and I began gurgling, like interacting with this visitor that my father couldn't see. And then the breeze went the other way some minutes later, and by all accounts I fell back to sleep. So whatever that is, my father used to say that it was his father visiting his new grandson. But with what ensued for the rest of my life, I have other ideas, because I've had a less than normal life. When I was 5 years old, I got up one morning. My mum and dad and my brother and sister, they were both older than me, we never went to church. But I got up one Sunday, and this is where I started hearing the voice, and I was led off to church. And it was some kilometres away, and being 5, it's quite a dangerous thing. And my parents would have woke up on the Sunday morning and they were minus one child, and I can only imagine the angst that they went through. They didn't know where I was. Strangely enough, I didn't see the police prowling the streets looking for me, but that's a side issue. And so I turned up home, and 5 years old, and my dad was this huge guy. And I looked up, and, you know, I just didn't feel any fear about having departed the home without any sort of permission or whatever. And Dad said, "Where have you been?" Well, of course, I looked up and said, "I've been at church. It is Sunday." And he looked down at me, and I guess he was quite surprised that there was no remorse or fear in my little face. And he thought, well, check this little fella out. And then he just relented, and he said, "Well, are you going next week?" And I said, "Well, I sure would like to." And he said, "Good, well, take your brother and sister with you." And so began my walk, let's say, with God. That's the way I understand it. And to this point, I would say none of it was my doing. And what followed after that was a steady stream of experiences with spirits. It would seem at night, I had no say in it, I would go astral travelling. I had recollections of battling evil spirits and having all sorts of wild adventures. And one day my mum went to see a medium, and so she obviously was in contact with spirits. And so she told my mother about my older sister Wendy, and then my older brother David. And then she said, "Andrew, I just can't get hold of him. It's like he's not on planet Earth." And I would say it's still true. Wait to hear the rest. And she said, "But he does go astral travelling at night." And this is in the 70s. My mum sort of wasn't onto it back then. And she said, "What's that?" "Oh, he goes out, his spirit leaves his body and he goes out battling evil spirits, and he knows he's doing it." And so my mum came up to me and she said, "Andrew, blah, 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 blah. Is that true?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it is." And she said, "Well, you're grounded. You can cut it out." And I thought, well, that would explain why I'm always tired at school and this and that. I just wasn't getting the proper sleep. So I consciously said to myself that night, I thought, that's a really good idea. So I consciously said, "Andrew, no astral travelling tonight." I grounded myself, and I haven't done it since that night. So it appears that we do have controls over it, but they're very limited because these things come and have their way with you sometimes. When I was 14, it was a very magical year. I was in bed one time and decided to go to bed at 7:30 one Saturday night, and you know, my parents were still in the living room laughing at some comedy show, and I could hear all of that, and no one else was in the room. And all of a sudden there was this red spot above me, and you know, I generally see eye colours, so it really didn't worry me. But to cut a long story short, this thing seemed to have a presence about it, and even though I closed my eyes, that presence was still there. I could still see it, even though my eyes were closed. I opened my eyes and it was still there. And then all of a sudden, this red dot grew, and it covered the whole length of my body. And then I just froze with fear. I was only 14. I didn't know what on earth was going on. And then it sunk into my body. And I was so gripped with fear, I could still hear my parents laughing at this comedy show, but I couldn't yell out, I couldn't scream. I was so petrified. I haven't had a fear like that since. And I thought, what do I do? What do I do? And I couldn't utter a word, and so I thought, say the Lord's Prayer. I was an altar boy at the time. Say the Lord's Prayer. And it was so uncool for a 14-year-old to have to actually say the Lord's Prayer. But I managed. It's the only thing I could say out loud. So, Our Father which art in heaven, and out it came. And I got 3/4 of the way through this prayer, and whatever it was, and I know it was a demon, it took off so fast. It just took off at 100 miles an hour, and it felt like it ripped half my chest out with it. And you know, even though I still had that sense of ripping through the chest, I knew I was free, so I quickly got up, and being 14, just ran out to Mum and Dad and just yelled, Mum, Dad, you know, this has just happened. And I was absolutely petrified, but so thankful I got released from that situation. So, you know, the sense that if that sort of thing exists, this wasn't anything that I asked for, it just happened. These things just happen. If that sort of thing really exists, and it was really quite nasty, then I knew God existed, because I've always got this awareness that a balance has to exist in the universe as it does here on earth. And it was the same year that we went to visit one of our relatives. She was 2 years old, and she'd been in an infectious diseases hospital for 2 weeks, and a couple of our families went to see her. We saw Natasha through the window, and then us kids got dropped off in a communal playing area, and it was quite cold. You know, it was the old 70s style hospitals with the big long corridors and vinyl floors, and the wind just swept through these places. And while I was playing there with my cousins, and God knows what the parents were doing, this is where I really started struggling hearing the voice. And that voice I would call God, because only good ever came out of it. And so I learned very early, you know people by their fruits. When they bear bad fruits, you take a step back. But these were always good fruits. And this voice said to me, just go and see Natasha. And I thought, no way, my dad's going to flog me silly. And so I ignored it. And then the voice spoke a little louder, but much more commanding, and said, go and see Natasha. So I thought, I think I'll just do that. And I had to come out of this door, turn right, and I know Natasha's room that she was in was a quarantine room. So if I got caught, I was in a whole lot of hurt. And it was a really long trip down to this room. So I was walking down there, fully sort of empowered by this voice, because I knew he would look after me. But you still have that trepidation that, oh man, if I get caught, I'm so dead. And so I made it to the room and not a nurse in sight. No parents, nobody, not a soul. And I walked in there and I didn't know what on earth I was supposed to do. So I walked up to Natasha in this quarantine room and the voice said, "Put your hand on her head." So I placed my hand on her head, and all this energy, this very powerful energy, started coming through the top of my head, down through the arm and into Natasha. And then all of a sudden I knew exactly what was going on. She was getting the healing she needed. It wasn't my healing, it was from external. This stuff clearly exists. I have no need to lie, because I'm not hopping on here, sorry about that, I'm not hopping on here just to tell all this cockamamie story. This is actuality. And so as a 14-year-old, here I am in this room, hand on the head, thinking, wow, this is something different. But I was just doing as I was told. And after a while, I had a vision that the top of the head shut. And that told me that the healing was done. But just being this child, I hadn't been told to go yet, because that voice was very commanding, and my soul had no qualms about doing as I was told. And then, just like a parent would or a father would, the voice went, "All right, you can go now." And I went, "Oh, good." So off I went, out the room, had a quick peek to the left. It's a long, long corridor. And I thought, oh, you know what, I'm just going to get caught. But there was a toilet to the left there, so I ducked into the toilet, made out that I had gone to do some business in there, and then casually walked all the way down to the creche room. And you know, not a soul came. And I actually felt a bit let down within myself that I didn't trust, that I wouldn't get caught. That was part of that issue that I'll never forget. And so a couple of minutes later, Natasha's standing up in her cot. The doctors didn't know what it was that she had. They couldn't diagnose it, and she'd been there for a couple of weeks. A couple of minutes later, she's standing in her cot screaming for her mother, and she was healed. And so there's a miraculous story in itself. I think by definition, if you can have 3 certified miracles in the Catholic Church, you're a saint. So here we go, let's rack them up. But you know, generally speaking, when these things happen, they're so spontaneous, you have no control over them. They're so, what can I say, they're so random, you don't see them coming. I think that the time is chosen, and the recipient is chosen, and the vessel is chosen, and so, you know, recognition is not important. What is important is that people get to understand. I understand that because you haven't experienced it, you don't have to believe it. Seeing is believing. That's a given. But to share it, there'll be a lot of people out there that have had these experiences that won't share it. And so this is encouragement that you can get it out there, and feel free to let it, you know, let it loose, because it'll set you free, and it's okay to share it. So yeah, that was a busy year, and had a wonderful spiritual walk in church. I would just go there, and just the sense of God, the sense of an elevated spirit, the sense of love, of light, that I knew what the world was like, but it really didn't matter, because I guess God was there for me. And I guess you've got to heal yourself first before you go about healing others or helping others. You take the log out of your own eye. So yeah, I had that very powerful year that year, 14. Yeah, it brings back some very fond memories, and one of the parishioners would come up to me. He was an old fella, and he would say, "Andrew, every week I see you, your aura just grows, and it's just this beautiful aura at 14. And I said, I could tell he was giving me a compliment of sorts. I said, "Oh, thank you very much." And he would walk away happy that he shared, and then I was scratching my head thinking, what on earth is an aura? What's that guy talking about? But I knew it was something good, right? So yeah, we moved along from that, and you know, life went on. I joined the army, you know, lived a bit of life, and I guess for the year that I was 14, for me it was a pointer that this is what's out there. Because as humans, we're always going to engage at some point with life. We've got to get on with it. We have to get a vocation. This is what we're taught. We're going to get a vocation. We get married, settle down, and engage. And so, while that's vitally important for our own security, it became very clear after not too long that that's not what I've been chosen for. So in all seriousness, I really can't relay my whole story and do it justice in a short video like this. I would say, you know, my life was littered with episodes of what you might call clairvoyancy or psychic ability, but I don't call it that because it's just, you know, being able to tell when someone's just died. Just this knowing creeps into your head. It's like someone's telling me. It's what for ages I called connectivity. I had that term phrased much earlier than when it first came out, but I kept it to myself. We didn't always have the media to share and the ability because I was too young. You know, sensing a spirit in the house, seeing spirits in the house. And it was very obvious that they were attracted to me because, you know, we'd get what the average person might call a haunting in the house, and mum and dad are out at a, strangely enough, a spiritualist society meeting on, say, a Tuesday night, and it's dark outside, and suddenly there's a big bump down the other end of the house, and it's in the darkness. Now, bear in mind, Wendy and David are my older brother and sister, so traditionally the young ones look to the older ones for security, so something goes bump down the other end of the house, and a serious bump. And we had so many spiritual experiences in that house as kids. They would run into the kitchen, and like all I saw was my brother and sister running at me, and they go, "Oh, Andrew, there's something going on down the other end of the house." And I'd like freak out more about them being scared than I would about whatever's going on down the other end of the house. And so guess who went into the darkness to go check it out? Yeah, the young brother had to protect those guys. And it was quite hilarious, really, and I'm venturing down into the darkness thinking, I'm not sure it's supposed to be this way, but anyway. And so I learned to deal with fear regarding these things very early. And yeah, they really don't hurt you that much. Fear is probably their object. So yeah, I've kicked that into touch. And I find that fear is the opposite to love, not hate. Hate is a product of fear. I believe in protecting love at all costs. You know, I venture around some, some, can I just say, without being demeaning, some, you know, average people. And you know, the average person likes to demean somebody or talk negative or you know, it's not wholesome talk, and I let them know that I'm not happy to be around them. In fact, you know, it looks quite arrogant, or I just show them my back, but that's me protecting myself because you know, they're just, it's not love. It doesn't sit within me, and I don't tolerate it. And it's not an arrogance, it's a choice. And so once I'm true to myself, I'm fully empowered. I just feel that love growing within. And I even have love for them, you know, and the empathy grows for them because they're just committing an atrocity against themselves again and again and again. And so if you watch their target, they learn not to target me because it just doesn't get through. You know, once they do that in front of their friends and it doesn't work, they're looking silly. So they pick somebody else, and the only side effect of what they're doing is misery on that person. It's just terrible. And so we have to watch this just perpetuate through humanity. So it's very important not to let fear be prolonged in your psyche, in your life. You've got to live in joy, and you've got to live in love, and it's not going to happen if you're living in fear. You've got to work out what's causing it, and it's not a bad thing to get rid of it or deal with it in a loving way. So, like I said before, I can't share every story. I mean, this is real. I could take hours if you like, so I'm not really doing it all justice. I have to get into the meat of some other issues. My life took a turn down the healing path, and it was actually the year that I was 14. It became a pointer, if you like, because I strayed a long way, and I'm not going to talk about that, right? That's not why we're here. I strayed a long way living life, and you know, one morning I was lying in bed, and admittedly I was with my girlfriend. I was only 21, and so God spoke to me, and I heard him very, very clearly because he had something for me to do, and he said, "Are you right?" And I heard him, so I ignored him. And he said it again, "Andrew, are you right?" And I said, "Go away." "Not now." And so he did. And while I have a smile and a smirk, it was entirely the wrong thing to do. And so this is the energy of youth. I always had this energy, and I've done so much with it, and it's not been bad, but it's not what God would have wanted me to do with it. But I didn't have that wisdom, and now I do. And now that I honor that energy, I think that the younger generation these days, when they engage this way, they're much, much wiser and harder at it than we ever used to be, just different ages. But yeah, you honor that energy that's given, and things just grow, things just happen, and what it is God honoring you, honoring the gifts that he's given you. So I wanted to, you know, nothing was really going right in my life the way I didn't feel like it was happening for me, and I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm not being who I really am, who I'm meant to be. And that's where that healing with my cousin Natasha sort of took hold, and I looked at myself and said, well, that was a pointer. This is who I am. I know it within myself, and I've been running from it. So I started a massage clinic. I got qualified as a massage therapist, started my own clinic, and the idea was to get my hands on people to see what would happen. Well, I tell you what, I was still studying and it started happening. You know, we just at the prac stage, we had to do prac just to be able to qualify before we left the college, and you know, I could feel people's bodies talking to me. This one guy, he was a big toughie with the tattoos and, you know, the attitude and whatever. He came in for a free massage, and his body was screaming at me, saying, "Tell this guy to stop hurting me." And it was like you talking to me. It was that clear, and I went, well, that's embarrassing. I can't say that. I don't know the guy. Tell him. And it was, I don't know if it was his body or his spirit, but what I was hearing was, tell him. So I couldn't resist it, and I said, I'm so sorry, but I have to say something to you. And he was face down, this big tough guy, And I said, I have to say it, your body's screaming at me, mate. I said, it's saying, stop hurting me. Well, this guy just burst into tears on the spot, and I had to let him cry for a good 10 minutes. And I just kept massaging him. And when he came out of it and stopped sobbing, he shared that his mother had died 6 months prior, and he was training to be an Olympic cyclist. And when she died, he dropped his bundle and hit the drink, hit the drugs with those friends. And he was pretty much, having a hard time dealing with his mum's death. And I said, well, what do you think your mum would want you to do? And so off he went. And he came to see me 3 more times after that, and he was back on his bike, he was totally healed, he was re-engaged, and that big tough guy looked totally different, and he thanked me so much. And so we didn't have to talk like this, but somehow there was that energetic connection, and the right things happened. He didn't ask how, I didn't ask how, but it just happens because, once again, these things just happen. There's a back current here that we're not really catching on to. It's because we're taught not to talk about it. The energetic world that exists all around us, people call it spirit, people call it this, people call it that. Whatever it is, it's real. And so it's not a mystery. And so as we navigate life, we come up against a lot of things. We read a lot of things. There's a lot of mysteries about the world, and it's always been a fascination of mine. Now, once again, I fully understand if you haven't experienced something, you don't have to believe in it. It's logical. So, I'd never seen a UFO, and here he goes. I'm going to say it. One night I saw a UFO. I've seen 4 now. And, having been an altar boy and all the rest of it, it's like, where does that fit in? I am a seeker of the truth. That is very deeply my core. I can pick a lie out at 100 paces. I can see people's, not in a new age way, see people's energy. I can totally see straight through them, like someone gave me the blueprint to humanity. If you Google empath, those attributes are who I am. I can just see people for what they are. It's an energetic level, but I see energy in terms of what we call spirituality as the human expression of energy, but there's a scientific application too. The two go beautifully together. So I saw a questionable sighting of a UFO, but in hindsight I know it was one, because the miraculous thing is what happened the following night. And I had a witness with me that saw it too, and we stared at it for 5 minutes. It didn't move, and it wasn't supported from the ground. It was very clearly something different. And I said to my friend, you don't suppose that's a UFO, do you? We turned and looked at each other, and when we turned back it had disappeared. Wow. So the next night I was doing a part-time security job in an RSL, and I was running late. So rush. Got to get there. I wasn't thinking of UFOs or this or that or the other. Just get there and fulfill your obligation. So I made it there at 1 minute to 7, and there I am, this security guy. I got a short sleeve shirt on with the security patches and the muscles, and looking the piece, and I thought, well, I'm here, done. And straight away this smaller guy, he's a slight guy, bumps into my left shoulder, and he bumps into it hard enough for me to look down and say, what are you doing? And he looks up at me with these eyes, and he looks straight into my eyes, and he says, you never remember in the morning, And the hair on the back of my head just went, whoa. And I knew in my spirit exactly what he was talking about. But, you know, being fiercely logical, I kept my cool and I said to him, what are you talking about? And he still held my gaze and he looked me in the eye and he said, you know. Wow. And it just totally flipped my mind. And so he proceeded to tell me about his abduction. I won't go into it, but I guess it was quite an amazing tale, and he wasn't shy about telling it, just as I'm speaking to you now. And so for him, whatever it was real. I will never say I've been abducted, because I don't have that memory, but I've seen 4 of them. The million-dollar question is, that was the night after my first sighting. I was over 30. How did he know to come and tell me? You know, there are all these mysteries to us because we live in this third dimension. But if we had an understanding of the sciences around it, how energy moves, and indeed how entities employ that energy in that other dimension, we can call it, or in that in the ethers, there is clearly something that exists with us. Yeah, I have a theory on these UFOs, but you know, that's way down the line. This is just an introduction. I hope you don't think I'm too weird just yet. So yeah, I saw 3 more of those. Now, if we get back on the Earth plane, we should ask the question, if all these occurrences happen within one life, and as Shona and Heather would testify have happened in their life, and no doubt have happened in the lives of others, why don't we get to talk about it? Why is it that talk like this is shut down? I'll tell you why. Because it leads to talk about energy. It leads to talk about something like God. It leads to talk about all this stuff that we're taught is weird, that those guys are nuts. But how many people are nuts? I don't know Shona. Until now, I still haven't met Heather, and we share a commonality. So that needs explaining within itself. And so we're actually on the Earth plane here. We're not even out of the solar system. You know, we're not off the planet. We're actually talking about occurrences here. And so, you know, with all these occurrences on the Earth plane, there's one thing they all have in common, and that is energy. And similarly, we're not taught about energy. What are we taught about? If we understood energy, we would be a lot closer to the truth. And so therefore, we'd be a lot wiser, a lot freer. I will guarantee you, a lot freer. Because we are stuck on the Earth plane, and for some reason there's all these immaculate deceits that aim to keep us there. For instance, the theory of evolution. It's been going since 1859. Charles Darwin very innocently put it together, and I guess, you know, he put that theory forward and using the sciences of that day. And science has made so much progress since. But their focus has been to gather information and make it fit the theory. A theory that they're so... I don't think they're convinced that it's right, but they will say they're convinced it's right. They're so convinced they're teaching it as fact in schools, and they're covering that fault by saying, we're teaching the theory of evolution. So we're teaching a theory. Well, it's not proven. And so the other month, they dug up another skeleton in North Africa. They used to say that the pathway of modern man was about 200,000 years. And when they dug up that skeleton, they increased it by 50%. That's 300,000 years. The timeline just stretched a lot. And it's a big stretch. Now, if I was in charge of that theory, it'd been going for 162 years. And I suddenly had to increase the timeline by 50%. I would have to say that I'm not really getting a grasp on what the truth is here. The theory is in disarray. There are so many different ways to disprove evolution as such, and while I'm sitting here in my armchair, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but logic really dictates. Science goes so far, but then you have to apply a bit of philosophy and a bit of logic. So for some reason, they're very keen to get us stuck on the earth plane, descended from a puddle, descended from an ape. And what it does is it steals the opportunity for you to know what I believe is the truth. And that is that we were seeded here. You know, archaeological digs, archaeologists are using the Bible to find ancient cities, and they're finding them. It was only a couple of years ago they found the gates of Gath. They were very fabled gates, and Gath is where the biblical, not so much hero, infamous hero Goliath came from, that David had a battle with. They found those gates, and they used the Bible to find the city. These cities have been long dead and buried. So there's a truth in our ancient writings as well, and the movement for the day is that these ancient writings are being discredited. There's a move away from these ancient writings. Now, we're not talking about religion here, because religion is man-made. We're talking about the truth. And so now we can talk about another branch of science called quantum physics. Quantum physics has found that subatomic particles, which are the minutest of the minutest, there's so many within just one atom. They're so small. They're singular particles are displaying intelligence. So scientists will provide a double tunnel, and they'll shoot an electron through there, and they can prove mathematically that electron passed through both passageways, both tunnels. One electron, two pathways, so it was actually in two places at the same time. And it can go through as a wave, which you probably can't observe, or a particle. It can choose what form it takes as well. It can change form. But it only will go through the two pathways when you're not watching. If you decide to measure its pathway, it will only go through one. It's almost as if it doesn't want you to know that it can change form. There's an aspect of the universe here at work, because there's so many photons and electrons at work through the universe, obviously, that they must all be the same. They must all have this intelligence about them. And when science discovers intelligence, they know that intelligence is not accidental. It just doesn't appear. It's like, and scientists are saying it, it's like a grand design. Intelligence is not accidental, and each of these particles carry information. What they're actually doing, scientists are very confused about, they can't explain why it's having this reaction every time we look at it. It's maintaining its singular form. I'll put it to the scientists that can test the theory somehow, that is intelligent design in itself. That we have knowledge of the nuclear aspects of our universe, and we have developed nuclear weapons. It's not common knowledge, but I know for a fact that we have electromagnetic weapons, we have sonic weapons, and we have microwave weapons. I've had a first-hand experience at one of those, thank you very much, and it's not very pleasant. So we have that. What we do is, when we gain an understanding of a science, we weaponize it. We see how we can best use it, or not. So why on earth would, say if someone's in charge of this, why on earth would they allow us access to that technology that is the whole premise of the whole universe outside of Earth? So it's looking like that this, if you excuse the expression, is a virtual prison. This is our playground here, planet Earth, and we are not to understand the structure of the universe or what's outside of it for some unknown reason, but the most simplest I can offer is that we will use it for destruction. We will use it for not much good eventually. So it's kept out of our reach. And that goes with the premise of each particle, which is intelligent design. Why aren't they teaching the findings? There are more astounding findings than that. This is just scraping the top. I don't have the time to go into it. It's a fascinating topic. Why aren't they teaching us this when they have this archaic theory of... the theory of... I'm losing it now. It's so tired. I'm up late. I'm so sorry. They have the theory of evolution that they're pushing, and they have this wonderful new science here that they're not even discussing with the general public or pushing it onto the new generation so they can advance it. And the answer is because someone is in charge of this, something is in charge of this, and guess what? They're our makers. They're in charge of this, and they don't want us to have that knowledge. And we're here for a reason, but we have access to, let's just say, the energy, the love energy. We have access to so having shared as much as I could in the space of time, I'm sure right out of time, I'll finish it off and I'll say simply that my mission, and I am very clear on this now, and it's been a long time in the coming, my mission is to get people off the fence, is to dissolve these deceits. There are many more, and I just, as you can tell, I just can't cover it all. There's plenty to say. Is to dissolve these deceits in the minds of people. There are so many obstacles in the way. It's an exciting and a big job. And to get people to realize the truth, which I'm not going to go into now. I've run out of time. I'm so sorry, but there is a bigger truth at play here. Just on what I've presented in terms of evolution, quantum physics, and the experiences of my life, has got to speak to you that something is different here. Something's going on. I'm sure a lot of you have had some of these experiences, and if you haven't, I pray that you would stay on board and follow the thread and question honestly, because I'll present quite a few things that'll make you challenge what it is you thought you believed and what the truth is, because I am a seeker of truth. I'm no fool, and I don't treat people like fools. I treat you like a brother and a sister. I treat you all with love, and my mission is to get people off the fence, and I'm talking about believers, atheists, people of the science fraternity. If I'm wrong, I'd love to hear it. If I could help advance the cause, I would love to be a part of it. And if someone's listening and something resonates and you can improve the whole scenario, I'd love to hear from you. It's all about reaching the truth so that the love can live within, because that is the most that we can ever be, is to embrace your neighbor, is to embrace your community, as a child of light, fully empowered, full of the truth, not suppressed the way that that they want to suppress us, whoever they are. This is it's not a conspiracy theory here or anything like that. It's just reaching a point of truth, which I will help you do, making your life better, making your outlook better. Look, I just feel so wonderful, even though it is 1:20 in the morning. I love talking about it, I love sharing, and I can't wait to engage you in such a meaningful way that we make a difference in each other's lives. So on that note, thank you very much for listening, and look forward to talking with you soon. Shalom.